Welcome to Flow with Recess, a podcast to help you unlock your best self. Join Chief Psychology Officer of Recess, Matt Swartz, and our CEO, Kelz, your hosts on this journey to flow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Flow with Recess podcast. We're excited to have you. My name is Matt Swartz.
And I'm Kelz.
And we're here to talk to you today for our second part of our potential series on self-worth. Last time we were talking about imposter syndrome, and today we'll be talking about self-worth, which kind of goes a little deeper.
Yeah, I feel like when people hear things like self-worth and self-esteem, it sounds so scary, like automatic defensiveness, at least for me.
Tell me about that, because I've been bathing in this personal growth world for 20 years. Yeah. So tell me about I say self-worth and you think what?
Think self-esteem is used. So I think people are comfortable with things like imposter syndrome, right? We comfortable using those terms, but then we are on, or at least I feel so. So let me speak, for myself, but I feel like, self-worth, it feels more, I guess, vulnerable. It's more vulnerable to say than what we were talking about last week, which is just I have imposter syndrome. Yeah.
That's so good though. That's helpful, because again, you got to remember, I'm the 13-year-old listening to Wayne Dyer tapes while I mow the lawn, right? So I've never not thought about self-worth. Yeah. So I love. So let's start here. Think about, you're in a company, right? Think about being in a company. In this case, you're a co-founder, or, if I'm talking to another CEO, another director, if you're a CEO, I might ask a question like, how's the relationship with your COO? Right? Or if I was, talking to a sales director, I might ask, how's your relationship with the operations director? Mm-hmm. I assume that question is a little less scary, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And so that's kind of what this is. This is how is your relationship with yourself, right? How is the relationship between the part of you that's in charge and the part of you that's doing the things, And so, is that CEO operations? Is that, however you want to, but think about it like a relationship first and foremost. And maybe that's a little less scary, but I guess it's still going to be weird.
Yeah. Okay. No, it does. It does help to sort of separate yourself from it, but I think what happens a lot of the time is that it's easy to speak about things like externally projecting, but it's difficult to speak about things when we internally project it. And I think this is what it really is in terms of that imposter syndrome, is more that external space. Yeah. And now we're talking about the internal reflection on some of that stuff. And that's where things get vulnerable. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Excited about the conversation.
Here's your 30-second bilateral moment. If you aren't already using headphones, now's the time to grab them and keep the flow going. Take this time to reconnect with your body and mind. Just listen to the sound move back and forth between your headphones and pay attention to the sensations in your body. Liked that? For more bilateral moments and full-length tracks, check out our bilateral playlist on YouTube. Links provided in the show notes.
So let's start as scary as possible, and then let's slowly scale back. So what is self-worth, Matt? This mushy, gushy, vulnerable, right? Self-worth is your level of connection or relationship with your inherent, immutable value. I'll say that with less big words. It's about your relationship with how much you matter.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to take it piece by piece. We're going to start with what are maybe the different components? What is the self-worth thing, right? But we'll start with some external stuff to make it a little more comfortable. Let's talk about what worth doesn't come from. Okay.
Yeah.
Worth, if you think of a 2-year-old, I have a 3.5-year-old, right? So I'm watching this in real time. That my 3-year-old thinks everything he does is amazing. Right? He thinks he doesn't know enough to know that everything he's doing isn't perfect. The only people who are going to tell him otherwise, you can't see me, but I'm raising my hand. It's this guy, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to be the one for the next 18 years, his dad, telling him what isn't valuable. He wants to play around, but it's time for bed. That's not valuable. Mm-hmm. He wants to chase, but he needs to eat his dinner. So chase isn't right. So I'm myself, my wife, we're going to be the ones disabusing him of this notion of inherent value.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's sad, but there's really no way around it. Because if we got to get out the door, you got to put your coat on, buddy. Right? And no, I don't want to make him feel bad. But he wants to play, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a natural shift that happens through parenting where kids go from thinking they are 100% perfect the way they are to learning that there are specific expectations and rules and structures around their life. And unfortunately, that is part of parenting. Mm-hmm. Now, if you want to there's this whole conscious parenting movement. There's a bunch of ways to improve that process. There's tons of good parenting podcasts out there. I'm not the parenting guy. I just know enough to know that most of us, we will be doing this to our children accidentally or on purpose, right? But certainly all of us have had it happen to us. We were sent messages in our childhood about, oh, you take too long to get ready, or well, I don't want to go to school today. Well, somehow that's not okay, right? So if I don't want to go to school and it's not okay, then I must not be okay, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it starts with parents. And then school comes into the picture, right? This is an A, this is an F. Well, I tried my hardest. Too bad, it's an F. Right? Well, I'm not as intelligent as the other kids. Yeah, we can see that, Timmy, with your C-, right? There is an inherent set of ratings. There's a rating scale that says how valuable or how not valuable are you to the teachers. Now, a good teacher will work to change that communication, right? But at the end of the day, there's still a rating scale.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking, but I don't want to go too far off the conversation. But I'm also thinking as we go into, how this affects us as high performers and entrepreneurs. But I guess part of me while you're talking, Matt, I'm just thinking, what is that balance between that sort of, like what it really is, that balance between needing to function in a social space and also not internalizing or chipping away at our inherent idea of value or worth,
Yeah. I think to make it simple, the starting point, which is maybe I was a little too intense with parents, right? I mean, come on, guys, like we're trying to love our children. We're trying to care for our children, right? If you are aware that the process of this sort of social discrimination, right, of what's okay and what isn't okay, sends these messages, then that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I need to be conscious of how I'm affecting my child in this moment. And so then if we have a difficult moment, we can come back afterwards and we can talk about it. Mm-hmm. If I'm a teacher, be conscious of how the kids who aren't doing well, yeah, they may be acting out and they may be pissing you off, but it's probably because they're in 7th grade and they've already gotten all of these messages about why, they're not good enough in school. And gosh, they don't like school. Of course they don't like school. It hasn't gone very well for them. Why would they like it?
Yeah.
So just, I think, and we can actually we'll talk about that balance, right? But I think it starts with just being aware of that balance, right?
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah, makes sense.
And so then we've got other places we're getting these messages from. We're getting these messages from the media, right? Instagram's telling us, oh, we need this watch or this car. Even our cartoons are telling us we need this breakfast cereal in order to be a superhero or whatever, right? And then, for a lot of us, like religion, there's a specific structure. And then there's a lot of mixed messages, right? So I'm a child of God, but I was born in sin.
Yeah.
So like what, am I worthy? Am I not worthy? Right. So I think it's really confusing. Right. And the vehicle of activity in all of these different areas. And of course there's other areas than just those four, but those are four big ones, right? Is the emotions of shame and guilt. Right. That when we mess up, we feel guilty. Right. And that's what begins working away at our worth. Fundamentally, and we'll talk about this a little more, but biologically, when we feel guilty, it feels unsafe. And so our brain goes, well, we don't want to feel that way again. How do we fix it? And there's this constant trying to work around, how do I not feel shame and guilt? And a lot of times the answer is do what other people want us to do.
Yeah.
But if we can't figure that out, I grew up ADHD, you've got some attention stuff, right? If we can't seem to do what other people want to do, then we start getting these messages that go, oh, I am wrong. And that's where that feeling of guilt becomes shame. And we go, something's wrong with me. Oh, if I wasn't ADHD, if I could pay attention, if I wasn't so anxious and got scared, if I wasn't so depressed and shut down, right? And so the guilt is natural and normal. We have to learn how to navigate around it. But the shame is where, we really take those things on and we internalize them when we're not given the opportunity to process guilt in a healthy way. If our parents can't help us through it, if our teachers can't help us through it. So it's really down to the emotions of shame and guilt.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And then the final thing I would add here is that the shame and guilt kind of moves into this whole construct of social value. And this is where you kind of come into social value being, how are other people are praising me? Am I helpful or unhelpful? Am I good or am I bad? Am I smart or am I weird, or am I awkward, or am I, whatever, right? All of these sort of messages I'm getting from the outside world about who I am. And you're right, there's a balance, right? If I just ignored them, that wouldn't work. I'd just be doing what I wanted all the time, but if I over internalize them, that's a problem, because now I've lost myself and I'm doing what everybody else wants me to do.
Delicate balance. Yeah.
Delicate balance
for sure.
So that was the crummy stuff. And then let me talk about like the nice part, and then we can go into more details, right? The nice part is that self-worth at its core is your connection with your inherent creative potential, right? Your ability, and again, you can go into like Christianity, right? We're made in God's image, which means we're creators, right? I don't know. I guess I'm Christian heavy today. I was just as a reference. I'm not trying to push any sort of religious perspective.
Yeah.
I'm just using cultural frameworks, right? Connection to your creative potential. And so I always use the example, right? You're Monet. You're not the water lilies, right? So you are your creative potential. You're not your job. You're the skill sets and the output, not your role. You are the person that earned the money, not the car. You are the one that went to school, not the degree, right? And so too often we're over identifying with our creations or our manifestations as who we are, rather than identifying with the creative source and the creative potential, which again is our inherent worth, which again is like, we're humans. Look at the stuff we can do.
Yeah.
Pretty freaking crazy, right? Even if you're the weirdest human, you can still create way more than a fox can create. So that's pretty gnarly, right?
Yeah. I love that. I love that reference that you just said. And I think like, just even reflecting on what you said, I feel like a lot of us just so, again, part of the external stuff we spoke about last week, we just attach ourselves to a lot of these external things to crave that internal value. But, you said it perfectly there, that really, we are money, not the lilies. It makes perfect sense. And I love that.
Awesome. Good. Yeah, I'm glad that helpful. So to differentiate some language, right? Because you said there's all this, there's self-image, there's self-esteem, there's worth, there's like, so let's differentiate this, right? So I'm going to use the word self-image, or we might use the word identity. Okay. These words mean it's sort of the story of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Our beliefs are story about who we are based on what other people have told us. And again, especially impactful is those early experiences in childhood of shame and guilt. But it's also, what have your friends said about you? What have your teachers said about you? What has the Tumblr said about you? Am I dating myself? What has Tumblr? What's that? People aren't even on. I know. What have these people said about you? And then how have you either agreed or disagreed with that and taking it on? So it could be something like, oh, I'm a musician, or I'm an accountant, or I'm that could be part of it. But it could also be, I'm intelligent, or I'm kind, or I'm thoughtful, or negatives, right? I'm an asshole, or I'm greedy, or, and so probably our self-image is a mix of both, some positive and some negative. But most often our self-image is more built on what we have taken too seriously that other people have said about us, that's filtered through their BS and filtered through their pain and filtered through their needs, right? My parents keep saying I'm smart because they want me to get good grades so they can feel good about themselves. And so I take on this label of smart as an example, right? Anyway, so that's self-image and identity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes 100% sense. Part of when you're talking as well, I'm also thinking about this idea of also regarding, we hold on to these positive and negative parts of what people tell us, because we're sort of reflecting socially, especially as we're younger. But part of me is also thinking about even in more, I guess, in more negative circumstances where there are a lot of trauma, and just how critical that is also in terms of our identity and the things that we even, that kind of becomes stored into almost who we are,
I am poor.
Mm-hmm.
Bad things are always happening to me.
Yeah.
I take one step forward and two steps back. I always mess up.
Yeah.
If something good happens, something bad always happens afterwards. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. So we have all of these beliefs that come out of these patterns of pain that may have been true in one context, but then our nervous system projects onto new contexts and the world at large.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
And we live the rest of our life framing our experiences through those beliefs. And you will confirm those beliefs, I assure you. You will find things that happen bad after things happen good, right?
Sure.
I don't know. I got in a car accident the other week, right? If I was a different person, I might have said, oh, I got in a car accident because this good thing was happening to me. And then that prevents me from engaging in good things because I'm trying to prevent those bad things from happening, because that's what I believe about myself.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So true.
So self-image, identity, these stories we have, I want to differentiate that from self-esteem. All these words get used interchangeably. They're different. Self-esteem is what I'm talking about in terms of the relationship we have with ourselves. Self-esteem is the relationship between my awareness of myself and my doing self, or my being self, right? So it's the part of me that's deciding how I feel about the thing that I did yesterday, right? Oh, you had too much food. You're supposed to be on a diet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then either I beat myself up in the shower, you shouldn't have eaten all of that, right? Or I go, oh man, that must have been really hard. Why was that so challenging for you yesterday? Right? And we yeah, that makes sense. I talk to a friend like that, right? But myself, no, come on, skip that. Just don't eat like that. Right?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
So most of us have this oppositional or controlling relationship with ourselves, and I can go on a whole podcast worth of tangent, but it derives out of the thinking brain's desire to control the body and the emotions that come with it. that don't fit in neatly to its goals or its process, right? Like, I want you to be lighter. Yeah, but I was really hungry. Come on, body. What are you doing? You're on feelings. What do you mean you felt like having another icicle or ice cream, whatever, right? Come on, we have goals, right? So it's this sort of relationship between our thinking mind and our body and our emotions. And most of us haven't been taught about that relationship. Probably most people are going, what do you mean different selves, different parts of me? There's one me. Like, yeah, I understand. Most of us, especially Western, it's very culturally oneself, right? But, you can view it that way, but you could also think about, I have my circulatory system and my musculoskeletal system and my nervous system, right? I'm one body, but I'm also multiple parts.
Exactly.
One self, but I'm also multiple parts of that self.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess
last term. Go ahead.
Oh.
Yep.
No, I just so basically self-esteem has to do with almost around how you sort of identify internally and how you sort of hold on to some of that. Is that really what it is in terms of how you?
That's part of it, but so how you identify.
Yeah.
Would be the self-image,
right,
or the identity,
yeah,
right? How you treat yourself,
right,
or the relationship you have with yourself would be the self-esteem, right? So if I have high self-esteem, it means I like my identity.
Yes, I see.
If I have low self-esteem, it means I don't like my identity or my self-image.
Yes.
So my self-image could be I'm smart.
Yes.
But my self-esteem can be I don't like that.
Yes. Yeah, I get it.
Because I'm supposed to be smart, but I keep doing things A- level, and so I keep creating this bad relationship with myself.
Makes sense, right? Makes sense.
So I'm a hard worker, could be my self-image or my identity, and I could have a positive self-esteem about that. I love that I'm a hard worker. Good job, good going. Or I could have a low sense of self-esteem. I'm exhausted. I don't have anything left to give.
Makes sense. Got it. Perfect.
But good. Thank you for asking, because that drives me into examples. So then finally, self-worth is that thing underneath that is this inherent value, right? So it's not self-image or identity, which is the stories and traits I'm talking about. It's not self-esteem, which is the relationship. It's this inherent worth, right? You don't have any more or less self-worth than I do. Now, you may have a deeper relationship with your self-worth than I do, or vice versa, right? We can't really build worth. We can discover it. We can remember it.
True.
We can deepen it. We can build self-esteem. You can build a relationship, but you can't make anybody more or less worthy.
Yeah.
So the question is, where am I sourcing my self-esteem from? Am I sourcing it from that worth, or am I sourcing it from my social value, approval, right? Am I sourcing it from, it's either the things I've done, the things I have, or the feedback people give to me, my achievements, my accomplishments, my social value. And if I'm sourcing my self-esteem from there, it's going to be transient. It's going to be up and down, right? Like if I'm doing great in my business and I source my value from that, I get it. That makes sense. That's what we're taught to do. But then when your business starts going down because of a market fluctuation, you suck. Right? And versus like, I'm worthy whether my business is up or down.
Yeah. So it's really, as you said, so it's really less about building, because at the beginning of this conversation, I thought like we're building this idea of worth, but it's really less about building worth because we have the worth. So it's really about really sourcing some of our esteem, some of that energy from the understanding of we are worthy.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
exactly. Right. And then one last note, and then let's, I want to ask you about some of your experiences, Kelz, is the number one thing below the surface, and you were talking about trauma that's going to get in the way, is safety. And this isn't just physical safety. This is psychological safety. Most of us believe that safety equals smallness. And that's the guilt. That's this basically somebody tells you, no, don't do that. And you contract, you get smaller. You go, okay, well, not that. Okay, well, not that, right? Because I'm trying to stay safe. It's not safe if the other person doesn't like me. I might get kicked out of the tribe. I might get kicked out of the family, right? So we're operating on this very basic tribal sort of safety notion, right? So we get small and we contract. But especially if we're going to be leaders, especially if we're going to get into flow state, we have to be ready to expand and let go of that smallness, right? The smallness keeps us safe, but it doesn't help us feel fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And it's the smallness is ultimately low self-esteem or self-esteem that's sourced from other people or other circumstances.
Yeah, makes sense. I feel a lot of people are in that space where they literally, most people, even leaders, I mean, still have to work through that process, because sometimes, I gave that example about that team member in the last episode where we're sort of contracting our goals to basically on his level, that is almost that safety thing. So I feel like a lot of us, even though we may even be leaders in some way, we still sort of operate within that space. We sort of create a world that keeps us safe, and we and as much as we push on one side, we still sometimes operate within that small bubble.
Want to get even deeper into flow? Learn more about today's episode on our blog, The Science of Productivity. Find out more about today's topic by visiting our blog, Building Self-Worth, Strategies for Strengthening Your Sense of Self. Here you'll get more insights and tips on how you can maintain your flow state every day.
Yeah, so I mean, deepen that for me, if you would, Kelz, to share some of your sort of experiences as we're talking around self-worth, experiences where you've seen that not go well, what is this, how do you relate to this concept in your life?
Yeah, so as I was saying last week too, Matt, I feel like this particular conversation is basically like where I am at right now. Like I've noticed that like it's something that I am sort of therapizing through at this current moment. And I have noticed a lot of all these things in my previous vision of myself. I remember even in terms of my startup before, everything was external. Everything was external for me. If I wasn't successful, if my business wasn't successful, I would get into major depression or major depressive episodes. When things were going well, I was great. I was on top of the world. And so I am now sort of in this place where I'm realizing, and as much as I thought I had this great I thought I had this great self-esteem, but I'm noticing that a lot of it has been external. A lot of it has been external, especially as you mentioned the stuff about the downturn, especially within COVID is when I noticed something is wrong, and I never saw it before, because when everything sort of collapsed, when I wasn't able to travel as much as I would have, I wasn't able to, just do a lot of things that I typically was able to do. I just noticed that I started to just slip more and more into this sort of depressed space, right? Because it was just me with me. So that means that I wasn't really sourcing a lot of my esteem from my worth. That was reality. It was external. And so that I'm currently in that space of trying to just be conscious of that, and basically realizing that actually was for the 30 odd years of my life, the space that I was operating from. And now I'm sort of relearning some of that and working through some of that. But definitely for me, most of my esteem, most of my value was really pulled on external things, and it was very okay, because I was able to be successful in a way. I was able to do different things, and so I was kind of riding on that. But definitely during the pandemic,
Yeah.
I realized, like, shit, like, no, it's
There's always an
yes,
until, right? This was working great
yeah,
until, right? And then so you learn. Can I give what may or may not be a
yeah,
good
of course,
example from something
yeah,
that we've worked with, right? So we were having some trouble with specific elements of management, which meant that we were kind of slowing down, right? And so it would be very easy to say, "Oh, I'm not good enough. This isn't working." Blah 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 blah. Versus, no. You are the creative capacity to manage. Can you manage? Sure, I can. Can I learn to manage better? Sure, I can. Can I implement better practices? Sure, I can. Can I be more diligent? Sure, I can. Can I be less afraid? Sure, right. All of these potentials, right? That's the worth.
yeah,
The self-esteem says, oh, but it's not going well. And because I've attached to these external things, something must be wrong with me. Now I can't do as much work. Now I can't go back to the conversation, right? And so it's that you have the potential.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the
Yeah,
worth.
so true, Matt. Like, that's what I like that example, because I think we use a real life example with us with recess, right? Like, when things aren't going right, just like what we said with the pandemic, when things aren't going right, that's really when it would really test to see where things are coming from. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Matt? What are your experience with worth?
Yeah, I mean, so I've spent a lot of time on this, right? I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think one of my main ones was always, I'll be good if I achieve. I grew up in a very success-based school district, right? I have a mom who's very, wanted me to achieve because I had this really high perceived capacity, right? And so there was always this, like, I got to get more, I got to do better, I need to achieve. And if I don't get that A, something's wrong with me. And if I don't, if I'm not making this much money or having these clients or getting where I want to go, something must be wrong with me. So I've been working through that a lot through therapy, right? And so now I have less need to prove myself. It's like, hey, either you enjoy the conversation or you don't. No big deal, And then the next one, that sounds very flip, but trust me, I've spent years working on this. So, that's the result of some really good work. Another one was like, I'm good if I help. Right. So, became a therapist. My mom wants help, right? I need to help in order to be good. And that, did they mean to do that? Nope. But that was the message. Right. So a lot of, my deeper therapy recently has been getting to know that deeper self, that worth, that inner child. Right. And I think, the way that manifests all the time is like comparisons on teams. I'll go like, if there's somebody in the room that I perceive as an expert on something that I feel like I should know more than them about, like, Lisanne does coding. I don't want to learn coding. Great, she's the expert. But if you brought, maybe one of the researchers, right, and we're having a meeting and maybe one of the researchers says, well, Matt, blah, 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 right, I'm going to go into this weird, yucky control mode because I think I need to be the best person in the room on this thing. Otherwise, I'm not good enough versus like, oh, I can learn something. Oh, there's some value this person can provide. Like, and so I have to be very careful about those triggers. It happened to me. I was in a meeting today and already happened. So, so I'm at the stage, like, just be aware, let them be the expert. It's okay to learn.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And it's funny because for me, I feel like sometimes it's the opposite for me because, it's like, so I think what happens to me in a team scenario is that I have a lot of experience in a lot of different things. And sometimes I don't trust myself at all. So sometimes I pad and I fill and I think that there's a lot of things that needs to happen, and then I end up tripping up on myself or tripping up the team because I'm just not even trusting myself, or it's
Yeah, totally. So trust, right? So there's the word, right? It's about self-esteem. It's about the relationship with yourself. It's about trust. And we can do another podcast on trust. Trust is safety plus connection. So remember, we talked about this being somewhat of a safety issue, right? If I can't trust myself, if I don't feel safe, and if I've decided my safety is either achieving or making everybody else happy, and I'm not, then I don't feel safe, then I can't trust myself. Feedback loop, feedback loop, feedback loop.
Makes sense.
So, worth understanding, I think, right, how self-worth and flow kind of work together, right? We have this one, one of the 5 factors of flow is potential, right? So when I'm thinking about how do I help somebody grow their potential, one of the things that I want to help, and you alluded to this earlier, is an effective balance between the past and the future. Often we rely too much on the past to source our potential, right? So, okay, here's the thing, right? I'm either an apple tree or I'm an oak tree. Okay. I'm not going to be a 7-foot tall basketball player. It is what it is. So I need to be aware of the past on some level to go, okay, I've always produced acorns. I'm probably going to produce more acorns, right? But in terms of the number of those acorns, or the weight of those acorns, or the size of those acorns, or how many of them turn to trees, all of those I have an impact over, right? So wanting to form a relationship with that potential and that uncertainty. So when we have people sitting down for recess working on potential, we're not having them think about what I did do. We're having them think about what I could do, what I could be, and allowing that to kind of expand. Right. So my potential is, okay, I've achieved these things. That's good. But it's also like, what if I could be here? What if I could look at this? What if I could? And just getting people to dream and, again, connect with the inner creative spark rather than just the painting they already painted. Well, if you painted that, well, guess what else you could paint in 5 years, right? Maybe you can't do it tomorrow. Sure, right? You're not going to go from stick figures to Van Gogh overnight, right? But gosh, you can get there, right? So it's really, again, connecting with that potential. So we picked that word on purpose. We didn't call it value. We called it potential. What can I grow into, right? I don't want to say, you're a bulb, not a tulip. Well, actually, just a little water and some sunlight, you're going to be a tulip, right? And then the second component for flow is looking at the balance between individual and connection. And again, you were alluding to this balance earlier. It's not just what I want, right? It's also, we can create these big, enormous, wonderful things in connection with each other. So it's about relationship, but it's about showing up, back to imposter syndrome. It's about showing up to that relationship as your authentic, open self, thinking about your potential and what you could create, rather than showing up and going, how can I make this person happy? What do I do to avoid them being mad at me? Right? Like, oh, good luck. That's not. So we want to deepen that worth. We want to deepen that creative potential. We want to improve our self-esteem. And again, that can be a whole nother conversation about how do I improve my self-esteem over time, right? You can't just flick a switch. But the more self-worth I can connect with, the more I can grow my self-esteem, the more I can harness that understanding of my potential, my creative potential, the more I can understand how much bigger and better I can become in connection by harnessing my authentic self in connection with others. We're going to move more and more into that process of flow, into that experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think when we think about our idea of potential and getting into flow, I think it really also, I guess, is also breaking out of that smallness and that safety that we spoke about. So in doing that and being, we're looking at the future and we're expanding that potential. What we are doing is giving people the space to be able to come out of that sort of safety and smallness.
100%. I just want to underline that, Kelz. It's a really important summation of everything we're saying. You're going to have to get into the cocoon, let your caterpillar self be mishmashed all around, and then you're going to come out a butterfly, right? And but seriously, biologically, if you do any digging on this, the caterpillar, it's not just a couple of wings sprout out of the caterpillar, it's internal guts rearrange inside the chrysalis. It's very interesting, right? So, we have to, on some level, give up that small self designed for safety if we're going to expand into flow.
Yeah.
And when we're in flow, we're never asking, am I safe? And if we are, it's bringing us out of flow. We don't even think about it. Think about when you were in flow. Never once have you gone, is this okay? Am I safe? You're just moving and flowing, right? So, Kelz, we're wrapping up here for the audience. Tips on finding flow for potential for self-worth.
I know. I thought about this, and I know this should not be like a plug, and it's not a plug, but I would just have to say, I would really just have to say that the recess potential session, like we created, recess just for this reason. And doing the potential session, I really, really, really think is something that could help people to really go into that space of come out of that smallness and be able to really expand their internal capacity for a future. So my own would have to be the recess potential session, to be honest, and not only for us individually, but even leaders who have teams, like this stuff is important for teams as well. The recess potential session, I really think is a solution to fast track and to be able to do some of that work that can be years of therapy. Yeah.
And I also know what director of marketing Steve is thinking. He's thinking my manager Tom doesn't need to feel any better about himself. He's already a haughty a-hole. Okay, let me tell you what, he's exactly the kind of guy who needs to get in front of the potential session. Because that's affectation. All of that's defense mechanism. He doesn't really think he's all that in a bag of chips. He thinks he's projecting he's all that, so he doesn't have to deal with the fact that deep down he doesn't feel it. Think of the most confident people they don't tell anybody about it. They just go on with their normal life, right? So my tip, since Kelz was practical, I'll be a little more esoteric. I want you to spend time with your inner child every day. Asking that part of you that knows that they're worthy beyond anything, what do I want to do? And sometimes it's simple. I want to go on a walk. I want to go get an ice cream, right? I just want to lay here playing on my phone. Okay, right? Like, what is that inner child? But the more you connect with that inner child, the more that inner child is going to tell you what they want to create. My inner child wants to create recess. That's part of why I'm here. My inner child wants to bring people into flow. He's excited. I mean, he's going to get so geeked up. He wants to do a 12-hour podcast on all of the feelings. But I've done a lot of work to connect with that inner part of me over the past 3 or 4 years. And I would encourage everybody that it may feel wiggly, but it's just, connect with that part of you that wanted to go to Disney World. Right? Connect with that part of you that wanted to make the icicle sculpture. I don't know, whatever it is, right? There's a part of you in there that just wants to create, that just feels worthy and passionate. And it's in there beneath all the conditioning. You can find it. You just may have to get some of the conditioning out of the way in order.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like a lot of us really do need to reconnect with our inner child, right? I mean, I know there's somebody somewhere that is probably thinking, how they feel so disconnected from these different versions of ourselves, but I know somebody out there is wondering, like, how do I do this?
One fun thing. What's one fun thing you want to do right now? Something small, something free, something simple. Just start there. What is something small? I want to play video games for a half hour. Okay, you're connecting with your inner child, which is different than binging on video games for 4 hours. That's disconnecting. That's dissociating, right? What's one small fun thing I want to do? Start there. That's the simplest place to start. We can get into the complicated stuff some other time. And then, Kelz, to round us out, what would you give as a tip for teams wanting to deepen their collaborative experience of flow and work?
Well, I think it's really about spending time sort of validating each other as team members, not really about like the accomplishment and you did good at this particular task and, the project was completed, but also just in terms of who you are within a team, to actually acknowledge and validate that creative source within your team members. I think just building a habit around, a lot of the times in HR, we highlight, performance and these things, but we rarely do highlight and validate that internal creative source within our team members. And I think that would really help build that feeling of worth and build some of that within a team.
Well, Kelz, then let me do that for you right now. I love your vision. I love that you picked some random guy up from, quarter way around the world and brought him into this experience. And I love that you're able to energize and affect and create things with people like this. I'm so glad to be doing this.
Same,
with you right
Matt.
now.
Like same. Thank you, and same, Matt. Like really, I mean, same thing, and I do the same thing as well. Your passion, your energy, you bring so much to us just by being you, and I really appreciate you as well, and excited for everything that we're doing, and yeah, and
Thank you.
just excited for you being you and being a part of this with me. Yeah.
What a wonderful thing. Come on. It's that easy, guys. Come on. It's so good. Thanks, Kelz. Well, I think we've reached the end here, and we've given you guys some good thoughts on how to begin, moving into the scary territory of vulnerability and self-worth. I wish you guys luck with that. Thank you for joining us today on Flow with Recess, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys back next time.
Take care.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Flow with Recess. By the way, your flow doesn't have to end here. Our Recess app helps listeners unlock their most productive selves by reducing anxiety and improving their focus. You can find out more about our app as well as more resources to support you on your journey by visiting our website withrecess.com. Links to our bilateral playlist and this week's blog post are also found in our show notes. Until next time, find your flow and get unstuck with Recess.